Hi, it's Christina from the Sisyphean Journal, and we're continuing our look at Lyme 5. You can see my copy is very battered. I'd recommend that you buy a copy, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, as long as you care what happens to the women who walk into abortion clinics. You can want them to be legal and want them to be safe. These don't need to be mutually exclusive. You can want the abortion to be performed safely. Just because you want it to be legal doesn't mean you have to be okay with the kind of stuff I'm going to describe here, okay? You can advocate for better. So, in June of 1970, New York State legalized abortion on demand up through 24 weeks. And freestanding clinics started springing up like mushrooms all over the place. And Bernard Nathanson, who, like I said, I'm taking the beginning of this from his excellent book, began inspecting the new clinics. The first one he described as dark, dank, and unsanitary. He visited a second clinic and had similar things to say about it. And this one was operated by Harvey Carman, hero of the abortion rights movement. He invented the Carman cannula. We can totally overlook all that stuff with Kermit Gosnell and the supercoils and the women in Bangladesh and the supercoil balsa wood combinations and even the death of Joyce Johnson. We can think of this. He invented the Carman cannula. He's great. He's a hero. Despite the problems with these facilities, NARAL members invested in them anyway. But then Nathanson was approached with a challenge. The Center for Reproductive and Sexual Health was the largest freestanding abortion clinic in the world, and they were in trouble. And at the time, the state was starting to crack down on these seedy abortion clinics, as was the city. So, Crash had been touted as the model to prove that first trimester abortions could be performed safely in outpatient clinics. And, yeah, it did kind of become the model clinic. Like I said, if you follow this blog, my blog, if you follow this channel, the stuff that they saw at Crash, dog bites man. So Nathanson met with the clinic's administrator, and she told him the doctors were, and I'm going to quote from him, atrocious sadists, drunks, incompetents, sex maniacs, thieves, butchers, and lunatics. Half of them don't even wash their hands anymore before doing an abortion, let alone scrubbing. They refuse to use masks or caps, and their mustaches are dragging into the suction machines. I swear one of these days we're going to lose one of those guys right into the suction trap, and the lab is going to tell us the tissue is pregnancy tissue and the abortion is complete. I believe this. Why do I believe this? Because I've seen so many documented cases of doctors working in abortion clinics who were sadists, drunks, incompetents, sex maniacs, thieves, butchers, and lunatics. Not all necessarily the same person, but, this quality of doctor I've seen a lot of. Not washing their hands or scrubbing before an abortion, being sloppy. Yeah, again, dog bites man. When Nathanson inspected the facility, he found that it was chaotic, crowded, inadequately lighted, ill-equipped, poorly run, poorly staffed, dirty, and operating with no backup emergency hospital. Yeah, that sounds pretty par for the course. He also discovered that the abortionists were paid on a commission basis, which remains the norm. The more experienced ones would purposely underestimate gestational ages and then trick newbies into doing those patients so that the more experienced doctors, could do the easier, earlier abortions. Hold on, I gotta pause. So Nathanson's first task was to get the clinic in shape for an upcoming inspection. Now, he knew there was no way he could fix everything, but he figured if I can show the inspector abortion professionally performed in an adequately equipped procedure room, maybe they'll kind of let us slide on everything else. So he ordered sterilizing equipment, scrub suits, lights for the ORs. He imposed a little discipline on the staff. And the day the inspector came, everything went smoothly for the abortion that the inspector observed. Nathanson said that the inspector was impressed. He was even encouraging and soothing as he offered a mild critique of our ridiculous recovery room. As he left, he winked and murmured to me, "Don't worry, I knew we were safe for a while. The next patient after that wound up in the hospital with a perforated uterus. So Nathanson, though, after he got them through that inspection, he was starting to become really disillusioned. The clinic's administrator seemed to have developed a ghoulish preoccupation with doing more and later abortions, which, again, it's a pattern I've seen over the years. Nathanson suspected that the lab wasn't doing proper pathology reports, so he had a staff person extract a piece of liver from a cadaver and send it off to the lab. The report came back pregnancy tissue. The wife of one of the doctors reported that her husband had developed a drinking problem. 4 marriages ended in divorce. Affairs between staffers were very common. Nathanson resigned his position, and eventually what he saw led him to become a convert to the pro-life side. Although when he wrote his book, Aborting America, he was kind of teetering. He had not become pro-life, but he was no longer, a staunch defender of everything the abortion rights movement was doing. It was a please people clean up your act plea. Now that I think about it, why would the pro-choice movement listen to me when they just dismissed Nathanson, who had done, I think, 60,000 abortions? As, what does he know? Now, in spite of problems, Crash did manage to remain open. Now, they were cited by the state in 1984, 85, 86, and in particular in 86, they had no anesthesiologist on staff, and staff were improperly administering anesthesia. Again, if you follow either my blog or this channel, you know that that's a common problem that we see. Now, on August 10th of 1988, a 19-year-old identified in medical board documents as KB went there for a 14-week abortion. Now, in line 5, Crutcher calls her Christine for some reason, and on the Blackman wall that he had on his website, he called her Kelly. Kelly is the name that I use on my blog, and I'll link to her story below. But, so KB underwent her 14-week abortion. It was performed by Dr. Colin Bailey. And despite obvious signs of distress after the procedure, the clinic did not institute emergency procedures for almost an hour, and then there was a delay transporting her to Cabrini Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead from anesthesia complications. Now, during a subsequent health department inspection, the investigation, the inspectors found that her post-operative condition was charted as pink responsive alert, even though by that time she was in full cardiorespiratory arrest. In other words, they charted a dead patient as pink responsive alert. And again, if you follow my blog or you follow this channel, filling out post-op reports before the woman's even on the abortion table is something we see a lot of, which is why I do not believe these studies about how low abortion complications are. If they're filling out the post-op reports before she's even on the table, like Steve Lichtenberg and his staff sent a thank you note to the hospital that referred Deanna Bell saying uneventful abortion. It wasn't uneventful. She died. But, if you're documenting it in advance, then nothing goes wrong, does it? It may go wrong for real, but it's not going to go wrong on paper because you already documented that everything was peachy. The investigators found also that Crash did not employ proper monitoring equipment or procedures, had no working EKG machine, had no defibrillator available, and that neither the surgeon nor the nurse were properly knowledgeable about CPR procedures and techniques. And, of course, they dragged ass about calling the ambulance. So, the specific allegations in that follow-up investigation: Crash had no one on staff qualified to administer anesthesia. Dog bites man. We see that a lot. Did not employ proper procedures or equipment for administering anesthesia. Did not administer preliminary test dosages to determine the patient's sensitivity to drugs. Used dosages that were twice as high as specified in their in-house manual. Gauged the amount they were administering by eye. They weren't accurately measuring it. Their pre-op medical examinations were cursory and inadequate. No functioning emergency equipment. Emergency meds were past their expiration date. No one on staff, not just the people who were attending to KB, but nobody had current CPR training. They weren't even documenting respiration or pulse prior to putting these patients under anesthesia. Poor lighting in the operating room, lacked proper hand washing sinks in the exam rooms, and had no soap or paper towels at either the scrub sink or the recovery room bathroom, and had unsanitary conditions including stained scrub sinks, dirty walls and floors, trash stored in the operating scrub room, blood on 2 wheels of the operating room table, red makeup stains on the rim of oxygen and nitrous oxide masks, and uncovered and dusty tubing on the suction machines. Sterile surgical supply items were stored in the dirty washroom. Now, and during this time, the medical director was David Gluck. They were unable to produce any documentation verifying his credentials or qualifications, and there really wasn't any meaningful medical supervision of the facility being documented. In fact, even though one of the investigations was conducted a full 2 weeks after KB's death, there was no indication that Gluck had personally reviewed the matter or directed any changes to be instituted. They uncovered 18 patient medical charts that showed complications, and not one indicated that Gluck had reviewed it. So in September of 1988, crash was provisionally closed by the state. Now this was supposed to only last 60 days, but they never reopened. Now Bailey, who performed KB's fatal abortion, had his license finally suspended in 1991 for incompetence performing abortions and repeatedly testing positive for cocaine use. One of the incidents that led to this action was a botched abortion in which a patient hemorrhaged and required a hysterectomy. And an investigation revealed that contributing factors to her injuries were a lack of proper equipment and a delay in calling an ambulance. So, it doesn't look like KB's death hit him hard enough to make him up his game in any. Now, as for Gluck, his license to practice medicine had actually been revoked 2 months prior to KB's fatal abortion, but he'd gotten a judicial stay and remained licensed. The action was originally taken due to his 1987 conviction for illegally selling 48,000 Dilaudid tablets to pay off gambling debts. So that makes what Nathanson said, the administrator said about her doctors, ring kind of true. In 91, his request to have his license restored was granted, and he went to work at another abortion clinic where in 1994 he performed the fatal abortion on Alerte de Sanjis. So this was the model abortion clinic. This was how it's supposed to be done. And I can tell you, I have seen so many examples of this is how it's actually done that it would curl your hair. But only if you actually care about whether the women are treated with dignity, respect, and safety, which unfortunately the abortion lobby doesn't.